Welcome back to Simply Fujica, a place for budding and aspiring entrepreneurs. I do want to welcome you and thank you for stopping by to the channel. I want to talk to you a little bit about today's video. I'm going to say almost a year ago, I'm not quite sure when I did. But previously I have done a video about what does it take to going into a good care plan. And actually I think that's the title of it, Elements of a Good Care Plan. So I talked about that video. I actually shared a layout that I created myself. And I thought to myself, you know what, the care plan is actually a result of the assessment. And so I wanted to take a step back and talk to you about what does it take to do a good assessment. So if that's something that you're interested in, and I hope it is, then stay tuned. So in today's video, I did put together 4 tips for you. Before we get to the tips, I want to talk to you a little bit about setting yourself up for success. So let's talk about planning. When you initially get that initial inquiry, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an email, you really want to gather all of the information that you can from the person making the phone call. So what are the needs? What is the specific reason that this person has reached out to you to look for services, right? To look for care. So you want to get as much information as you can so that you can prepare yourself in terms of creating that assessment, really putting into your assessment all that's needed to understand what those clients' needs are, okay? So when that person's on the phone with you, whether it's a client or sometimes it could be a family member, you really want to know, hey, tell me about those clients' needs. As that person is talking, as they're sharing, you should be writing down notes, okay? Some of you may have a pre-assessment questionnaire in order to get this information. So if you do have one, this is another way to facilitate information gathering. So really just asking any questions, any health history that may be pertinent to this person's care, all of those things can go into the questionnaire. Whatever vehicle you use, you should have some type of process of gathering as much upfront information as you can. Before you get off of the phone, if this person is telling you they definitely want care, they definitely want to spend some more time with you to see if this could potentially be a good relationship, then you should be scheduling the assessment. In this portion of the conversation, you're trying to understand where the client is most comfortable, where you'll be doing the assessment at. Are there any key family members that need to be involved or present during this assessment? Make sure you understand their name and relationship to the client so that everyone is present to make these key decisions. That client is leaning on their family members to determine if this is a relationship that they want to enter in. So you want to make sure that those decision makers, those key family members are present during this assessment. So let's start today's video with the first tip, which is actually conducting the home assessment. Any type of meeting that you hold, any type of in-home visit that you facilitate, you want to make sure that you're building rapport. So when you're greeting people, you want to shake their hands, call them by name. You've heard me talk about this before, but you want to carry that level of respect when you're having a conversation with your clients. So it's Mrs. Polino versus just, hey, Fujica. Mrs. Polino is your potential client. Who are the family members? So introducing yourself, receiving them, offering the handshake, telling them a little bit about yourself, maybe making some light conversation. See if they have any questions for you before you go into what you're getting ready to do and what purpose the assessment serves. As you're talking, as you're setting up for the assessment, you're kind of observing, right? You're making observations between how the client interacts with their family members or whoever else is present during this assessment. You're observing, what does the living space look like? How safe is it? Are you getting ready to make some recommendations to ensure that the quality of care is carried out in a safe manner? Just really understanding the environment that you will be coming into and that you will be sending your caregivers to potentially. So now you're ready for the client interview. And the interview is really just asking more questions about the fact gathering that you did during that initial phone call. And if you did send out an assessment, maybe going over that assessment with the client. During this interview, you're asking clarifying questions. You're also understanding what tasks can this person do for themselves. You absolutely want to understand this person's medical history, especially if it's pertinent to taking care of them. So what does their medical history look like? What is their current level of activities of daily living looking like? And just understanding what is it that this person is looking for you in your agency to do for them. Now, if the client is looking for you to help them with activities of daily living, for me, it's a natural question to understand how those things are occurring today. Is it occurring with little to no mobility from the client? Is it being done with assistance from the family? Maybe this is a situation where they did have a previous agency involved, but they are no longer involved. So you really want to understand how much you're going to have to get involved with that client in order to ensure what that client's needs are. Now remember, you're also testing this person's cognitive ability, right? So how involved are they in the conversation? Are they the sole person making the decision? If not, then why? Is there a specific reason to that, right? So this is you kind of understanding cognitively what you're dealing with as a client. This is also where you're going to understand the client's social and support needs. Do they have a heavy support system? What family members particularly come over. This is also, if there are other family members that are present, what is the level of that family needing to be there in order to get that care that's needed for the client. This is also a good time for you to just observe communication needs. Is there some speech impairment, maybe a little bit of hearing loss? These are types of things that you can cue into so that you can address and understand if there's any needs associated with that communication challenge. This would be a good time for you to transition into a physical assessment. So what is this person's gait? Are they able to get up, maneuver? How are they moving? Is their mobility limited? Are they using anything to assist them with getting around, such as a cane, such as a wheelchair? Maybe they're using a walker. So you're really trying to understand what is that person's mobility level. This is a good time for you to transition into nutritional assessment, how involved you and your agency will be in providing nutrition for the client. So in today's world, how do they eat? Do they have any special diets? Do they have any special accommodation or nutrition needs? How do they prepare their meals today? Are you in your agency expected to prepare those meals? Are there any special diets or accommodations that you need to be aware of? Does the client currently feed themselves? Are you going to have to feed them? Right? How many snacks are they looking forward to each and every day? These are the types of questions that you're going to need to ask in order for you to understand what the client's needs are as it relates to nutrition. I want to talk about medication management, and I'm going to address this in two different ways. The first is today, you want to know how this client manages their medication. Do they take their own doses? Do they know what medications they're taking, and are they actually taking them on their own? Now, in the state of California, we are not able to disperse medication. However, we can provide reminders to that client to ensure that they're taking their medication. And in addition to that, if something were to happen, maybe a client has a reaction to their medication, you certainly want to know what medication they're taking so you can share that information with any emergency personnel or with a family member if that applies. Last but not least, you want to do like a safety evaluation, right? So you really want to just, when you understand what the client's main living situation is, are there any hazards? How is the lighting? Anything that the client may need, is it in arm's length? Can they safely get up to retrieve an item they need? These are the types of things you're kind of measuring and scoring as you're trying to understand what your client's needs can be. The last point that I want to discuss here is discuss any emergency plans that the client or the client and their family has come up with. So who should you contact in the event of an emergency? Are there any DNR orders that exist? Just things of that nature. You want to make sure that you're prepared. What are the emergency exits? Is there an emergency plan that you can have access to or have a copy of? All the information that they need in order to manage an emergency appropriately. Okay, with all that being said, we're ready to move into the second tip, which is to develop the care plan. And so again, I do want to remind you, I have done a video on the elements of a good care plan. I will make sure that's linked in the description below. Based on your assessment, caregiver, based on the client interview and based on the family interaction and their input, you should be able to come up with a unique, customized care plan that outlines, this should be very detailed, that outlines the services that the client needs. And what you're prepared to offer, what services your agency is prepared to offer. So you should be able to sit down, go through that care plan so that all parties are in agreement. If for whatever reason follow-up is needed, make sure you discuss a plan in terms of how and when that feedback is going to be delivered. Secondly, make sure that you put this care plan, make sure that it is signed by the client, make sure that you have signed it. Not only does the client get a copy of it, but you retain a copy of it. You retain the original in the client's file. The third tip that I have for you is documentation and reporting. So this is aside from the process with the client. This is just for your records. This is just what you're putting in to your client's file, and it's really just documenting any findings, right? Because you have now done the initial interview, you've done the assessment. If there's anything that needs to be documented, such as maybe medication or anything of that nature, you want to make sure that your file tells the story for the client and it has everything needed in order for you to take care of the client. You want to make sure, just a reminder here, you want to make sure all the client's information is confidential. You want to make sure that you are, whatever state regulations that surround storage and how long you need to have these things on file, you want to make sure you're recognizing those things. The last tip that I have for you here is follow-up and reassessment. So definitely you want to schedule a time or have some type of cadence in terms of reevaluating that client. Or is the current care plan that you have still meeting this client's needs? Does it need to be modified? What modifications needs to take place? I will tell you, any modifications that are done to the initial care plan need to be documented, and it needs to be in writing. Again, just like with the first, you would need to document why a modification is being made, and you need to make sure that the client receives a copy of the modification, as well as you're putting a copy of that modification in that client's file. This is to ensure that everyone is on the same page. It also tells a story in terms of how this client's progressing under your care. The last point that I'm going to address here is just make sure that the communication is open, that you're open to communicating with the client, the communication, as long as you have permission to do so. As long as you have permission to speak with the family and it's appropriate, that you keep that communication open with the client, okay? Open with the client and with that client's family if you have permission to do so. Okay, so that is all that I have for this video.